Firestorm has been sparked online by a woman, a British woman, who claims that she slept with 100 men a day and that she intends to heighten the number of men that she slept with, go beyond 100 as time goes forth. And there was a big documentary made by Josh Peters titled, I Slept with 100 Men in One Day. Now, this lady, Lily Phillips, has caused a lot of different people from different persuasions and religions and viewpoints to either criticize her or to see her as a victim of some kind of external influence that comes from men that have been participating in her exploitation, or see her as a victim of the broader trend of the Onlyfans and the broader trend of the sort of perpetuation of sex in the public consciousness by way of amateur pornography and so on and so forth. But I think that these perspectives are actually missing a wide variety of philosophical insight that I think can help us better understand the Lily Phillips phenomenon and also address it in a manner that is going to hopefully encourage other people to make better choices and explain why someone might do this kind of thing, despite the obvious problems that it might entail for their personal life, their mental health, and the strength of their soul. So in this video, we'll be exploring that with a non-judgmental lens, because I have no intention of judging anyone here or condemning anyone, but more so of understanding what's going on and trying to address it. My friends, before we get into that, hope all of you are doing well. I'm Christian Watson. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoy political and social commentary with a philosophical bent, then I implore you, please like, share, comment, subscribe, do whatever you can to ensure that we can get our messages out there. Even if you disagree with me, my friends, we are close to 20,000 subscribers. I hope that we hit there by year's end. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if that's likely, but I believe anything can happen. So again, if you want to approach these issues with a much deeper viewpoint than is often approached them with, then I would encourage you, again, like, share, comment, subscribe. Tell me if you disagree with me. Tell me if you agree with me. I don't care. Thank you guys so much. Now, please enjoy the video. So, before I get into this topic more, I want to hear more from Lily Phillips herself. Lily Phillips has done a lot of interviews expressing her sexual appetite and expressing the sort of reasoning behind why she does what she does, and expressing how she's done it as well. Here's one interview she did where she was describing her sexual escapades and the volume of them, and she almost seemed detached from them, which was very interesting, because something as intimate as sex connects us to a particular person or a particular behavior or a particular moment, even if it happens to be casual or fleeting. But even in that case, she seemed very detached from it, and she almost seemed heartbroken as well. Watch that.
I think sometimes like feeling so like robotic, like by the, I think like the 30th, you know, like when we're getting on a bit, I've got like a routine of like how we're going to do this. And like, it just, sometimes you'd like disassociate and be like, you know, like it's not like normal sex at all. In my head right now, I can think of like 5, 6 guys, 10 guys that I remember, and that's it. But it's just, I don't know, it's just weird, isn't it? Like, if I didn't have the videos, I wouldn't have known I've done 100, you know? But yeah. I think that was kind of the hard part, is like conversing with them, and like when they'd kind of be like, oh, like we've only had 2 minutes or 3 minutes and you said 5 on the message.
Did someone say that to you?
Yeah. And obviously it just makes me feel so bad.
Do you think you should feel bad about that?
I guess when you've promised something to people who support you, it's kind of hard to let them down.
But it's up to you, right? Like when you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you even processed, do you think, what's happened?
Not yet.
Now here's another video. This video, I'm going to warn you, is graphic in terms of details. It's just going to describe some things. But here's another video that kind of describes the sort of common experience that Lily Phillips has as it relates to her sexuality.
You were recently in Nottingham with Bonnie Blue.
Yeah.
What was it like having a 23-man?
Amazing. You were there.
Yeah. I wasn't part of it.
Yeah. Me and Bonnie, I think we'd been guys from about 4 p.m. and it was getting on for about, I think 11 p.m. I can't quite remember.
I think it was more like 1 p.m.
And there was still a massive group of guys outside, and we were like we're not going to be able to get through all these guys. So we said, you can all rather come in together or you're not going to fight, you know, bit of an ultimatum. So 23 of them ended up joining us upstairs, and they all went together, took turns. Well, they didn't really take turns. It was more like me and Bonnie got on our knees, and we got all 23 guys around us, like in a circle around us. And then we started just giving them jobs, getting them hard first. And then once like majority of them were hard, we then went into a train where me and Bonnie just got in, and one after the other, they just kind of took turns in us. And then I think we finished with like facials and stuff like that. We were getting the condoms, full condoms, and like putting them on our faces.
Wow. There's quite a lot to unpack here. But first, I want to go back to the fact that she seems to be in despair about this. When she's asked, how do you feel about all these men you've slept with? You could see tears coming up in her eyes. She says, I haven't processed it yet. I think that one of the biggest issues here is the issue of separating our reason, separating our introspection from our behavior. A lot of times people will only think about certain things when certain context causes them to arise. For example, most folks wouldn't think about philosophy unless they were posed a philosophical question by somebody, or unless they were in some kind of academic context or some kind of scholarly context, perhaps at a conference, or perhaps attending a speech from somebody. Most people wouldn't think about death, and this is going to be a generalization because there are a lot of people who do think about death in every aspect of their lives, who have an existential crisis. I understand that. But most people don't think about death until they see an instance of death in front of them, or they are reminded of something, whether it be in their personal family, whether it be distant and the media, whatever. Oftentimes, certain situations must arise for us to consider things that we may not consider. Now, a lot of people live life on autopilot. A lot of folks go through life reflexively. They don't actually think about each and every action that they make. And by the way, life would become very cumbersome if we did. We're not robots. We are dynamic beings. We are, what did Yoda say in Star Wars? Luminous beings, are we not this crude matter? There's more to us than just calculation. Calculation is simply one aspect of our thinking. And so calculation need not be a prisoner to calculation. It simply may be a tool for us to live more within the proper bounds of order. But most people don't do that. So most of us may not consider our behavior unless a question is posed to us about it, or unless a question about it arises through a situation we encounter. So for example, many folks, let's say that you are somebody who drives for a living. You may not necessarily think of all of the things that go on in your car when you're driving, or you may not even think of a lot of other things that may go along with that until those things arise and become immediately concerning to you, as if your car breaks down. But even in those cases, people will sometimes pawn off those considerations to somebody else, i.e. hiring a mechanic. I think Lily Phillips is suffering from the same kind of problem that most people suffer, is that she is on autopilot, doing all these different sexual escapades, but she's not presenting introspection and not considering her actions because she has habituated them so much that they are common to her. Aristotle was very clear, and by the way, there are some things I disagree with Aristotle on, but there are also some things that he was spot on about. And the problem of habituation is clear. The more you do a certain action, the more common that action becomes to you, and the more common that action becomes to you, the more it integrates into your character. Now, I do believe that our behavior alone does not shape our character. It's a very big part of it. But our thinking shapes our character, and most importantly, what's behind our thinking, because you don't think in a vacuum. I hope you don't. If you think in a vacuum, you're in tunnel vision. Not only does our thinking define our character, our intentions define our character. What defines our intentions? Well, your intentions also do not exist in a vacuum. Your intentions come from something else as well. Our intentions are informed by our worldview. So, what is at the heart of almost every problem we see? It's not necessarily a behavior problem, not necessarily a character problem, not necessarily even an intention problem. Sometimes it's a worldview problem, because your worldview is the ultimate regulatory principle that guides every other action you do. Imagine your worldview being right here, intention being right here, behavior being right here, character being right here. It goes from worldview, behavior, character, intentions. That's how we have to think about this. And so, when you think on one level, it's very possible for your behavior to continue unabated because it's not having the other considerations that would be necessary to form wise conduct. Because wise conduct, again, does not come from one level of thinking. If you go through life passively, just living, just existing, just going to that 9-to-5 job every day and not aspiring for more, then you're not going to consider, hey, might I have abilities that are beyond this? Hey, what should I be thinking about in life? What do I want in life? Hey, what do I view as important to me in life that guide my intentions? If you think on one level, if you think on a one-dimensional level, you get one-dimensional results. And Lily Phillips, unfortunately, from what I've seen, has a one-dimensional life where she is devoted entirely to the pursuit of passion, divorced from anything else. And this is the second problem, is that there is a relationship between passion and self-restraint that is oftentimes ignored in the modern day. Or I should probably say pleasure and passion, which, by the way, go hand in hand sometimes. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're actually opposed to each other, but sometimes in this case they go hand in hand. And self-restraint. The importance of self-restraint has been emphasized on by a lot of different philosophers throughout the ages. But I think one of the key insights that many of them have, one of my fundamental key insights as well, is that with a lack of self-restraint, it is very hard to achieve meaning in life. It's also very hard to achieve coherence in life. Now, if you want to achieve meaning, you must first have coherence. If a ship cannot move, if a car cannot drive, it's going to be very impossible for that car or that ship to get to a destination. You must have the machinery to operate first before you can reach a destination. And so the problem is very simple. Coherence requires recognizing the limits of your behavior and the limits of your actions and the bounds upon which both of those things should happen with them. This is morality. Morality are simply limits upon conduct, limits upon behavior, limits upon thought that shape you shape your behavior to be friendly towards society, to be friendly towards interpersonal relationships, and also to be friendly to your own personal development. But when all of that is just abolished and the only principle that's involved is the pursuit of pleasure, now your moral universe is crafted not with coherence in mind. Meaning is not even a thing because coherence can't be achieved. It's crafted with pure sensory pleasure in mind. That's why Lily Phillips, for example, for a moment seems so happy with a smile as she's doing what she's doing, when in all reality, you have to be realizing this is killing her inside because there is something just fundamentally just outside of the bounds of human nature about what she's doing. There's something just fundamentally wild about what she's doing, fundamentally, you could even say uncivilized a little bit about what she's doing, that is procuring in her this thought of, oh my gosh, I'm ashamed. But the shame, the personal shame, doesn't last very long. And so I don't believe she's living a coherent existence. Because a coherent existence is not an existence that is based upon the lowest appetite that we as human beings have. Our lowest appetite that we have is our sensory pleasures, our tastes, our smells, the sensations upon our body. All of these things are lower appetites. They can't build a society. They can't build a civilization. They can't build a family. They can't build a relationship. They can't build a marriage. But these things can enhance all of those. So they are enhancers, not foundations. What is Lily Phillips' foundation? It appears to simply be whatever and anything that will help perpetuate her Onlyfans page. There's no restraint, and there's no consideration. So we have two problems now. Lack of reason, distance between reason and action, and a lack of self-restraint. But we also have the question of moral responsibility. So people are saying that Lily Phillips herself should not be blamed for this, but instead, the men that are sleeping with her should be the ones that are blamed because they're the ones that are doing it. Well, I would say it's actually both. I would say it's both for a very simple reason. Just because others partake in our bad decisions for us or with us does not mean they are the origins or the start or the initiator of our bad decisions. Unless you are being forced to do something, and she's not being forced to do this from what I can say. She's not in a brothel. She's not in some kind of human trafficking scheme. If she is, then I think that this entire operation should be shut down. But from what I see, she's not. She's doing something under her own volition. And when you're doing something under your own volition, moral responsibility must first fall under your camp. It must first fall under your tutelage. If it does not fall under your camp, and you can outsource blame to other people, then you can never truly be held account for your behavior, number one, and you can never truly even define the parameters upon which your behavior should be judged and assessed, and therefore, you now have no standard by which to assess your behavior. So not only are you unaccountable, but you're standardless. And you run into another chaotic problem, the chaotic problem of having no limits. So not only is your self not restrained by limits, but also your relationship to responsibility is not restrained by limits at all. Do you guys see how this produces a discord and incoherent life? Do you guys see the consequence of this? And by the way, this is not necessarily even a religious problem, although there are certainly religious objections to what Lily is doing. This is a human problem. If you don't get these basic things right, you won't have the chance of living a coherent life. And so yes, the men who are doing this do play a role, but they play a role in their own sense. They are in their own genre of problem. They have their own vices that need to be tamed. And Lily Phillips also has her own problems that need to be tamed as well. And sometimes the problems converge, but apart and separate. The problems remain the same in essence, but they look different in form. So the men that want her, for example, and are willing to go around her with several other men around and have sex with her, those men obviously have a problem of overindulgence in pleasure, a problem of overlustfulness, and that problem is translating into risky sexual behavior. Lily has a problem, obviously, of not being self-restrained, a problem of not connecting her reason with her actions, a problem of worldview, and that is resulting in that reunion as well. Separate, you just get a problem of sort of overindulgence in pleasure and a problem of a sort of lack of self-restraint. These two things can manifest in so many different ways, but they're manifesting in a destructive way that we see right here. But there's also another angle to consider here. This will be my last angle that I consider. It's the relationship between heteronomy and autonomy. Now, many of you may know what the word autonomy means, but heteronomy, and I'm probably not even saying it correctly, so excuse me. I understand there probably be people that correct me in the heteronomy, correct me in the comments. But this is a distinction drawn forth by Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher. And in this distinction, Kant essentially says that autonomy is the ability to choose the moral law for yourself. Heteronomy is when your behavior and your actions are not shaped by your decision to choose the moral law. They are shaped by external influences that may be, for example, peer pressure. They may be, just informal obligations that you think that you have towards somebody. For him, autonomy is when you actively put yourself under the guise of the moral law. Now, I would differ with Kant in saying that I agree that putting yourself under the guise of the moral law, or at least being under the guise of the moral law itself, is a very important part of achieving freedom. I've always said that freedom is the end of a morally responsible person, and this idea kind of encapsulates that. However, we don't put ourselves under the moral law. The moral law exists because it exists in the nature of things. It is found in the orderly nature of things, and we must accord ourselves to it, or else we risk leading a life of chaos. We risk leading a life of ruin. We risk creating a condition where society is impossible. We risk creating a condition where virtue is unlikely. We risk creating a condition where just a lot of bad things happen, and where we're not living in accordance to our true purpose. And so, I'm not saying that people must actively put themselves under the moral law. I'm saying that we must acknowledge the moral law. Because if you don't acknowledge it, whether you elect for it or not, you're going to have consequences. But with that in mind, the idea of heteronomy is perhaps very apt in describing what has happened to Lily. Because she is moved by financial considerations. She is moved by, again, the people that give her this attention. She is moved by the friendships that she has that are obviously fueling her involvement in these practices. She is moved by so many different things that are obviously having a deleterious impact on her autonomy. People don't realize that we can be a slave to many things. We can be a slave to our passions. We can be a slave to our worst desires. We can be a slave to so many things and not even know it, because slavery is sometimes viewed as solely an external condition being imposed upon us internally, but few folks realize that it can be an internal condition that manifests externally, but manifests differently than how we typically see it, and therefore makes us vulnerable to remaining in that state. And unfortunately, I would say that Lily Phillips is most certainly a victim of heteronomy of those that are surrounding her. If you don't have people in your life who are encouraging you to be the best version of yourself, then I would encourage you to get rid of those people. If you don't have folks in your life who are encouraging you to accord yourself to what is going to be good, what is virtuous, and also what is right according to the moral law, then I would also encourage you to get rid of those people. I think that the antidote to this is very simply a recognition of who we are as human beings, and a recognition of what it means to have a good life, and a recognition of what it means to live within proper constraints. Because if Lily Phillips had any ounce of these things, I don't think we'll be reading about her as some kind of Onlyfans star. I think we'll be reading about her maybe in a more better context. Now, here's what I say. I don't judge people. People have all kinds of struggles. I myself have had all kinds of struggles, and I would not want someone to judge me for my struggles. And I don't judge people for their struggles, even if they're out in the public eye. It's very nasty. It's very disgusting. That's why I will not insult this girl, and I don't think any of you should insult her either. But I do think that in the midst of our struggles, it is good if we have folks that believe in us enough to will the highest good for us. That's what love is. And mutual social love, which is a different kind of love than the kind of love you would have for your partner, your wife, your husband. But mutual social love, loving your human being at a very base level, having goodwill, and then wanting to will the good for them at the highest level, which is why it's mutual, because that same thing happens to you as well, if it does right. That is the bedrock, I think, of having a healthy baseline by which to act in society. When that principle is absent, you get antagonism and enmity in most cases. I think that she deserves that, and that all of us that go through things deserve that. But having said that, and recognizing that she deserves that, we have to also recognize the forces that are pushing her, the sort of heteronomous forces that are pushing her against her own autonomy, and reclaim the conversation around autonomy for it to mean not simply following your deepest, darkest desires, but for it to mean to accord yourself to the highest orderly principles that are out there that are demonstrably provable through reason. That's the antidote to a lot of this stuff, I think, and I think that's the antidote to the Lily Phillips thing. So, in closing, my friends, we have to look at this case not as just some low-rung, promiscuous person who happens to get in front of the camera and now has attention, not just as some clickbait social media title. We have to look at this case as an example of where someone can go without restraint, of where someone can go without wisdom, and where someone can go without truly understanding, at least on a basic level, their nature as a human being, and simply being a willful victim of the various social forces around us. I call this the billiard ball effect. A lot of folks are billiard balls. They get knocked one way, they go the other way. They get knocked one way, they go the other way. We have to resist that. We have to resist that urge to be billiard balls. Because while man is a social animal, it does not mean he's a slave to social desires. This is where individualism comes in. Because the communitarian will say, well, man's a social animal, therefore he needs to be subservient to society, and all moral language comes from society. No, that doesn't follow. Because man is a social animal, he recognizes within himself the limits upon which he has to place himself to flourish, because society gives us resources that we in our own stead could not ourselves do if we lived out in the jungle, lived out in the island. But then secondly, he recognizes and frames the terms upon which others deal with him as well. So in order to be a social animal, really, you have to also be an animal that loves yourself, an animal, in the philosophical sense, of course, of that word, an animal that recognizes who you are as an individual, an animal that frames the relationships you have with other people around that basic sense of self-respect that you have for yourself, which then must include imposing limits upon conduct of other folks. In closing, let's aspire to recognize that fact, and let's also aspire to view these cases not with scorn, but with a sense of pity and a sense of sorrow, but also a sense of hope that someone like her, who's just 23, by the way, 1 year younger than me, can be rescued from this condition simply by people who are willing to speak the truth to them. My friends, like, share, comment, subscribe, do whatever you can. My friends, study history, study philosophy, remember more like a please stay pensive. Bye, guys.